So if you imagine, what if actually we, of course, are a part of the earth and we've been with the earth since the beginning and the earth needs us. And
Yeah,
it's not too late. We're going through a transformation and you are needed. You as an individual matter so much.
that makes sense related to how you pointed out that they live in that threshold between the
Mhm.
physical
Mhm.
and spiritual, and that for humanity there seems to be like a big wall between the two, but it's really very fluid for
Mhm.
them. So then it would also be for the bees very fluid in terms of time and timelessness.
Instead of we're trying to save the bees for years, I was like, maybe they're saving us, Who's saving who here?
Right, this is a very
Yeah.
reciprocal relationship.
We're healing with the bees.
It's such an
Yeah.
important reframe. Yay! Hello and welcome to the Higher Vibe. I'm your host, Jean Roorda. I'm having conversations with psychic friends. Today I have with me Ines Kinchen. She's the founder and director of the Emerald Arc School and the Emerald Arc Bee Sanctuary. She's a resonance medicine practitioner and tender to the bees and land in eastern Tennessee. Hello, Ines!
Hi, Jean. I have a feeling we're going to laugh a lot.
I know!
Thanks for having me.
Oh, I'm so glad you're here. Yes, I get very giggly and happy when I see you. So good to have you here. Oh, so Ines, I find you to just be a very magical human, as we all can be, but you're very magical because you're very tuned into the very magical realm of the bees. And honeybees have a potent special medicine for humans and for the planet. So I'd love for you to tell us about your work with the bees, like how that first got started, or it sounds like it's always been a part of your field, huh?
Yeah, thank you. As you know, we could talk about bees for days.
Yeah.
But let's narrow it in as
Yeah.
much as we can. Yeah, I think the bees have actually always been with me in some sort of way. I've always loved bees since I was a child. I did some bee tending in high school way back when. And then as I got older, they were with me mostly in my dreams.
Mhm.
I would say dreams and visions. And it wasn't until a little over 10 years ago when I was becoming more familiar with various earth healing practices in the biodynamic realm, like biodynamic agriculture, that I discovered biodynamic beekeeping, which was, I guess I could describe it as this blend of spiritual and practical beekeeping. And I was searching, well, I'll just say I've always been looking for this intersection of earth healing and human healing. Or some would maybe say where medicine and healing intersect the way we work with the earth. And the bees just led me right there.
Yeah.
And through the biodynamic beekeeping lens and practices, I was able to begin to work with bees really deeply. Tend to them, have hives, work with swarms, and it became clear pretty early on how deeply interconnected this caring for bees was with earth healing and earth restoration and also our own healing.
Right.
And now here I am.
And collective. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think it's so important to point out, Ines, that your work with the bees is very different from, I think, maybe the collective understanding of bees is, oh, they're for honey. So if you work with bees, it's about honey production or pollination. I think there's a lot of farmers that work with bees in terms of taking a hive to different maybe almond groves or places where pollination is needed. And so that's one aspect of beekeeping that I think is very widely known and recognized. But how you work with the bees is quite different. So I'd love for you to share the difference in the approach and the awareness of the bees as a collective consciousness, and the difference between, that approach of harvesting or taking from the bees. And you're really in a place of givingness and receiving. It's more
Right.
holistic.
Yeah, certainly. It definitely feels feels very reciprocal. And you're right. I mean, I think that's probably the first question I always get when people find out that I work with bees. The first question is, "Do you sell any honey?" Hey, so do you
Right.
sell honey? So I'll just say this, yeah, that the work that I'm doing, you're probably going to hear me say we a lot because it's not just me.
Yeah.
We have cultivated quite a beautiful community and hoping to grow that community across the world, with people who want to tend to bees and land. But yeah, our relationship or understanding of the honeybees has actually deeply transformed over the last just less than 150 years, really. Should
Yeah.
I go into the history just a little bit?
Yes. Let's
Why
hear
not,
about
right?
it.
Okay, yeah. So human beings have had a deep relationship with bees for thousands of years.
Yeah.
There are cave paintings to be found
Yeah.
that depict our relationship with bees. And we can find them in Egyptian hieroglyphs and the Greek temples. And until fairly recently, in the greater scheme of things, that relationship was always a sacred relationship. It was always somehow connected to those who were working closely with the spirit, one could say. And it wasn't until really the late 1800s and early 1900s that our relationship to beekeeping changed and became mechanized. So, with the invention of the framed hives, the Langstroth hives, which, if anybody listens to this who works with Langstroth hives, I have to say, there are ways you can work with those hives in a very bee-friendly method. I feel like I need to make a disclaimer that I'm not
Yeah.
here to bash any kind of beekeeping. This is
Yeah.
really more about relationship, which I know we'll get into.
Yeah.
But just for the historical, basically with the invention of the framed hives, where you could remove the frames to take the frames out and harvest honey. And that gave us also then the ability to look into the hives and see what was actually going on in there. Where before that, it was really this deep mystery.
Yes.
And that led to what's a really common practice now. It's artificially rearing honeybee queens. Right? So, and before that, honeybee queens were only created through the natural reproduction process of the beehive. So once that was taken away, that natural reproduction process, it enabled humankind to completely mechanize the beekeeping world. So instead of this natural reproduction, we were then suddenly able to make as many queens as we wanted to. And now you could make a hive, make 10 hives, make 100 hives, make thousands of hives. And it gave rise to what I guess what could call industrialized apiculture, really the more conventional, more extractive beekeeping of today. And what has happened is that over the last couple of, I guess 150 years or so, even less, the honeybee as a species has very much suffered and has become weaker overall, not able to adapt as much as needed to a rapidly transforming planet. So when you see those headlines of honeybee losses, it can be pretty jarring. We had in the United States and I believe Canada the largest honeybee losses ever recorded just this last year. Which were 60 to 70% losses in most places, and there were a few places where it was 70 to 100%, which would be considered total collapse.
Yeah.
The one thing to point out is that most of that collapse happened in the more industrialized beekeeping realm. And we had hardly any losses. I'll say, like, I can speak.
Yeah.
I also work for another honeybee sanctuary. They're Spikenard Honeybee Sanctuary in Floyd, right? I help coordinate programs there, and we have about 15 years of documented research that goes in the exact opposite direction.
Yeah.
So
your
our
bees are doing good.
they're getting stronger.
Yes.
Stronger and more hygienic, and really they're getting better every year. And the interesting thing is some of the diseases that are these honeybee collapses are blamed on, we can't even find them. We have no traces of those diseases at all. So let me get back to, I guess, to your
Yeah, no, but this really highlights the importance of just completely changing the approach, right? 'Cause
right.
I think
Right.
when we talk about honeybee collapse, the first thing that comes to mind is, okay, we're overusing very toxic pesticides, obviously, and we've got this whole influence of EMF radiation, and there's things that people have been pointing to. But from your perspective, I love this. There's a whole frame of mind going on. Like, where do those decisions to use pesticides and to see
Right.
bees as this thing to extract something from and to use, but rather that the approach can be more holistic and healing ourselves and our own consciousness, and then that shifts
Exactly.
the bees. Tell
Exactly.
us
Yeah.
more about that. I think it's so magical. It's so important. It's such a reframe that is just really crucial right now.
Right. And it's really this blend of spiritual and practical.
Yeah.
I feel like our world right now is calling for that. The bees are this magical mystery being where we could say, oh, maybe I just want to spiritually connect with the bees. And that's fine. If that's what's in your path, that's fine.
Yeah. They're
And
there
yet
for
there's
that as well.
also, right, but yes, there's also really important practical work needed.
Yeah.
And yet it's so important that that practical work does not come out of the same paradigm that created the problems in the first place.
Yeah.
So you're totally right. It's about healing our own, well, maybe in a little while I've got that pretty dialed in. Terms of what I think the three biggest paradigm shifts that need to happen.
Yeah, tell us.
I don't know if we should jump into that yet, or if I just go back to your original question where you asked about the honey. And basically, our work is about, we could say, honeybee health. And therefore, not just honeybee health, but also the health of all pollinators, of the landscape, of the ecosystem. Because in this view that we look at the honeybee hive from a wholeness consciousness instead of this separate little entity. And so one could say the landscape is actually the body of the beehive. Right? So if we're really tending to the bees, we also have to tend to the land. And just say one more thing about the current state of the bees is that there's this interesting conversation that has come up. And I think, as you know, these things are so reflective of all sorts of things going on in our current
Yes.
society, right? But
Yeah, you mentioned at one point to me that bees are a mirror
yes.
for
Oh,
humanity.
absolutely. Absolutely. 100%. And the way that bees have been treated in this very extractive way, it very much reflects also how we're treating ourselves, And there are some interesting studies that have come out from some of the universities that are, I would say, it's almost like a little cancel culture in honeybees, where honeybees, there's being pointed out, honeybees are farm animals. They're considered livestock. That's said in these studies, and that they actually harm the native pollinators. And because there is a scarcity of forage, scarcity of, flowers, basically, and flowers and trees, and that they can spread diseases.
Oh my goodness.
What's really interesting is that there's actually truth to that. When I first, but there's more, right?
Yeah.
So when I first heard that, of course, I had this reaction like, oh no, people are suddenly going to turn against the honeybees
Right.
and not see them for who they really are. But then I started realizing, of course, that actually those studies were starting to point towards the flaws and dangers of the industrialized beekeeping, which really is not good for honeybees or native bees or anybody really.
For anybody, yeah.
But the opposite can be true. It's just like how we can bring fertility back into the soil on a regenerative farm with cows.
Yeah.
Is not at all the same as when cows are kept in, a factory farm
A
setting.
confined, crowded space. Yeah.
Right. And when bees are shipped in by the thousands, by the tens of thousands of hives into these monoculture groves, of course there's going to be pressure on that ecosystem and so on. But what I'll just say through our research, and again, we've documented this, and we at Spikenard may be one of the only organizations in the world right now to really have that documented research, is that actually the opposite can be true. When you have a degraded landscape, Spikenard started on an old cow pasture. There was nothing there. The honeybee sanctuary that I'm building here in Tennessee, where I live, is in a forest. So we have the opposite. That's going to be a forest farm. Spikenard was on a cow pasture that's being reforested. And bringing the honeybees there helped heal the land, right? And then and then as we kept adding flowers and trees and more forage and really looking for what the balance is, like how many hives can this land actually hold versus how many hives can I have so I can get as much, right? We actually had more and more native pollinators returning, even ones that were thought to be extinct in the county started showing up, and it's just beautiful. So anyway,
and it's really from that reframe of approaching it rather than from this extractive, like what can we get from the bees? How can we support the bees, and in so doing support ourselves and support the land? And it's just that beautiful holistic healing and health oriented model rather than the taking and extracting and
absolutely.
Yeah.
Exactly. And it's not that we never get honey,
right?
but one of the things that we do, for example, is that we actually don't take the honey away from the bees before the winter. You know, it's common practice to take most of the honey away and then just feed them sugar water. That's how.
That seems so silly.
Well, you know, and there are, you know, there are many people that believe that bees can just do just fine. You know, but again, it just depends. What is your definition of a thriving beehive?
Yeah.
If most of them die, I don't think that's thriving.
Right.
You know? Or if they have diseases and things like that. But so the bees keep all their honey, and then if there's surplus in the spring after they get through the winter, then you know we can consider that a gift.
Yes.
So and it's very and honey in general. I'll just put this little plug in. You know, true medicinal honey from bees that are tended in this kind of way is one of the most powerful substances on earth. It's the only food that does not rot. You know, if it's kept in an airtight jar. There have been clay jars found that are thousands of years old with honey in it. And then if even just considering what true honey is, that the plant, you know, we have hundreds of plants. I mean, we have counted, like in my area and at the other honeybee sanctuary, in a honey that is truly the sum of all these plants, there could be 400 different flowers in there.
Yeah.
And
it's
so you think of what a medicine cabinet that is. Right. It's like they're all in there in homeopathic doses with their healing qualities, and it's just incredible. And so I think shifting, and you know, maybe this we can then conclude the practical part, but just we can be activists in a way by shifting how we work with honey, right? There are so many sugar alternatives now. You don't need to pour honey into your baking, you know. You can just use honey as medicine, 1 spoonful of honey every day, or for your meditating or dreaming or whatever it is you want to use it for. So
to really bring it back to that place of sacred medicine and recognizing how special it is.
Right.
It really is the collection of so many different plant medicines all in one. Amazing. Especially in such a diverse area. You know, I live in Oregon, high desert. There's not as much diversity of plants, but it's still that potent medicine from all of the plants that the bees visit. And then I think about where you live and just the biodiversity. It's
and
huge scale.
It's so amazing though, because if we're considering the landscape being the body of the bee and then the honey being their art, you know, like I have a kind of a collection of honeys from all over the world that I have, you know, found over time or been given as gifts. And in one of our workshops recently, I did a bit of a honey tasting because part of the theme of the workshop was earth healing and connecting with the landscape and so on. And so we tasted honey from all over the world, 3 different honeys. Like one was from Spain and one was from the rainforest somewhere. And then the last one we did was the one from here, the Emerald Arc. And all of them gave such a different feeling in the body, in the inner images of a place somewhere on the earth, you know, that was just unique to that place.
Yeah.
So beautiful. And then when we tasted the one from here, everybody's like, oh, that one feels like home somehow.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I love it that people could sense that. It really is. It's a beautiful practice when you have honey to just tune into all the information. It contains so much medicine and information and resonance with the place. And yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely.
such a doorway into learning and healing.
Yeah. So I wish I could share honey with you right now.
I
I
know.
feed you a little spoonful of honey through the screen, but
Yeah. Well, and I love that you collect it from all over the world. That's one thing that I love to do when I'm traveling is look for the local honey.
hmm
And but I don't, it doesn't last like I end up consuming it. So I don't have
you don't have a collection.
I
That's
used to have a little bit more of a collection, but over time
yeah.
it has all been, yeah, tasted and eaten by myself and my family. But I still do that when I travel. I get a little bit of honey from the local people, and just it's one way to tune into the land of
hmm
the area too. That's cool.
Absolutely.
Tell me more about, bees as mirror for humanity.
Okay.
Like bee, so we talked about the physical. It's clear
Yes.
that as bee colonies are collapsing, there's that mirror of, okay, the general health of the planet and of humanity is declining.
Right. Yes, we must
It's
return,
like
right?
major wake up call.
Absolutely. Oh
But
man.
how does that
Okay.
relate? Yeah, how does that relate to beyond the physical, the wellness of humanity on that spiritual level?
hmm
Yeah.
Oh.
Yes.
So I translated a beautiful book for a close friend of mine,
Yeah.
Karsten Massey, who is from Germany, living in Switzerland, and I translated that book from German into English because I'm a native German speaker. That book is called Gifts of the Honeybees, and it's all spiritual. There's no practice. It's not about practical beekeeping advice.
Yeah.
And Karsten has this gift. He's a very clairvoyant and really tuned into mostly the realm of the elemental beings and nature spirits. And so, has worked with beekeepers and healers mostly.
Yeah.
And it's just this beautiful book that I recommend.
Okay.
If you
Yay,
want to
thank
read
you.
the book that's spiritual, it's really, really beautiful book. But
Cool.
um, there's an excerpt in there or a part of a chapter, and I refer to that chapter quite a bit because I think he describes it so beautifully that honeybees are tenders to the threshold, between the visible and invisible realms. And they have been considered tenders of the threshold, again, for thousands of years. Human beings have known this, and that's why they were always kept in temple settings, monastery settings, and so on, right? So, as these tenders to the threshold, that being their spiritual, one of their spiritual tasks, it's our thinking, our human thinking, I should say, our disconnection consciousness that actually drains the bees of their life forces more than anything else. So and the way I imagine that is, well, I'll say this. I suppose we have to have a healthy imagination of what the spiritual world is. And I use the word spiritual world almost a little loosely because what I mean when I say spiritual is just anything that's beyond the sense perceptible,
Yeah.
right? So we can ask ourselves, what is my relationship to the spiritual world? Do I actually know that what meets me in the physical is the spiritual world? And not just there's this physical realm and somehow the spiritual world is like over there somewhere,
Over there
and
somewhere.
little golden
Like
thread that's
maybe
connecting
somewhere.
us.
Yeah.
Right? And then now again in that really hardening mechanization of the world right now, we're consciously separating them as if they're not even, as if there isn't a spiritual world,
Right.
right? What really helps me is and I've used this sometimes in workshops, in the science books, when we were kids, when they showed the light waves,
Yeah.
the right, and you have that little graph with all the waves, and then there'll be this little bracket, and it'll say this is the visible light spectrum,
Right, right, right.
and then they blow that bracket up into a bigger section, and then they'll show, you'll see the rainbow, and there's ultraviolet, and this is what humans can see, and
Right.
insects are over here, that
Yeah.
kind of thing. But what we can remember is that little bracket that we can see
Mhm.
is actually part of this infinite spiritual world,
Yeah.
meaning what's beyond what we can see.
With the
And
physical eyes. Yeah.
the physical, right? And that's how I think we can look at the entire physical world
Mhm.
as everything that I perceive with the senses, I can go beyond that, right? So it's almost like the physical world just appears out of the spiritual world. It's really just this little sliver that we
Yes.
see.
It's this like
And
little itty bitty part that our bodies perceive.
that's right, but it is the spiritual world,
It
right?
is, exactly.
Right? And so in that chapter, he
I
says
love
something.
that reframe. That's great.
Yeah, good. In that chapter, he says something that is really profound,
Mhm.
where he speaks about this disconnection thinking. And he said, it's not just the pesticides that we apply that affect the bees, it's actually the thoughts that led to
Yeah.
the creation of the pesticides in the first place,
Yeah.
and then applying them against our better knowing.
Yeah.
He's speaking directly to this disconnection paradigm, and he says very clearly that is what depletes the bees of their life forces more than anything.
Is our consciousness. It's like our own consciousness of separation and division of like that spiritual world is over there and maybe it exists somewhere over there. But we're over here and this is so it's like creating this solid mental barrier.
Absolutely.
And because they're the threshold keepers, it's like they have to go through this solid energy. They have to exist in that middle space, and it's
Right,
so solid with our dense
right, right.
mental separation consciousness. That makes so much sense to me. I hope that makes sense to other people. Like to me,
Yeah,
I see that as you're describing it. I'm like, yeah, you tune into where the bees exist in that realm that's so dense, and it's like, ow, yeah, that's
right.
really challenging.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And, if we can for a moment just imagine that the honeybee has been with us for a long time,
Mhm.
like for a long time, and I consider it, I usually say it's sister being, or maybe you want to say sibling being, but
Yeah.
it's a kindred being to us,
Yeah.
as if we came from the same place and we're returning to the same place.
Yeah.
And there are so many mysteries in the honeybee world.
Yeah.
By the way, you'll have to give me feedback. I'm starting a new workshop. I want to do a year-long workshop just on the bees, and I want
Yeah.
a year-long program, and I want to call it Bee Mystery School. I just want to be
Absolutely.
a Bee Mystery School. You can come to Bee School, but it's Bee
Absolutely.
Mystery
I
Schools.
love it. Well, because there's so many, like I was thinking of just calling our talk the magic and mystery and myth surrounding bees. There's so much you could teach for a year, and here we are trying to compact it into an
I
hour.
know, I know. We're not going to get too far. But one thing to say in terms of what your question, I'm always trying to, I know I talk a little bit in a spiral, but I'll
It's
come back to your
good.
questions. If you asked about the mirror, the bees being the mirror, and one of the things that we can discover when we're actually physically working with the hives or beginning to deeply observe the hives, almost everything we encounter is a mystery gateway.
Mhm.
And that's because one way to say it is that who the bees are physically is a mirror to our spiritual nature. So we can actually see our own spiritual nature, who we really are, and also what we can become in the beehives.
Wow.
And I'm going to say this, it's way beyond just the honeybee democracy that goes on in there.
Yeah.
There's so many other gateways. Often when people say, "Oh, let's work like a beehive," we're the social.
Yeah.
It's way
And
beyond.
that's a good first step. It's like
It's a good
noticing
first
that first
step.
layer is like, oh, they're cooperating. They're
Yeah.
working together. There's not this like hierarchical, it's more of a collective. But then it keeps going, right?
Oh my gosh,
So much more depth. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, even just exploring what a beehive does throughout a year. Like what really goes on in a beehive through the year can really connect us to what our soul life is like through the year, through the expansion and contraction of the seasons. It
Yeah.
can help us bring meaningful festival life back into the nodal points. I mean, so many things, so many
Yeah.
things. But
It reflects just that the natural rhythm of the
yeah,
earth cycles and our
absolutely.
own in breath and out breath
So
throughout the
much.
year.
So much. Yeah, I mean Rudolf Steiner, who I'm a former Waldorf teacher, so
Yes.
I like me some Rudolf Steiner.
Oh, yes.
It's really interesting because he gave some lectures in 1923,
Mm.
so shortly before he died, and they ended up being reformatted into a book that is now called the Bee Lectures.
Ah,
Interestingly enough, he predicted what was going to happen
yeah.
because when he gave these lectures, we were right at the precipice of beekeeping becoming
Yeah.
industrialized.
The big,
Because how to create queens manually
right.
had just been discovered. Interestingly enough, there was a beekeeper in the audience who felt like, wow, isn't that amazing? Think of all the things we can do now. He said this was going to lead to the loss of vitality in the beehive, and they kind of argued back and forth a little bit. And he basically said to him, talk to me again in about 80 to 100 years. And
Yeah.
that's exactly when, colony collapse disorder,
Yeah.
which is what, we're calling it in the modern world,
Right. When
really
you're tuned
became.
into the true nature of the bees, you can just see that trajectory. Like, this isn't going to go well, you know?
No, no, exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and now we find ourselves truly at this choice point, and like I said earlier, I mean, some people may be wanting to tend bees physically.
Hmm.
They want to become bee tenders, or maybe they want to be working deeply with earth healing and the land, or maybe you're not even directly working with bees at all. But who you are as a human being and this transformation leading back to what we just talked about of our thinking, really remembering who we are as human beings, coming back into a wholeness consciousness is vital to the bees and all other beings of earth, really, right? But the
Yeah.
bees are such an archetypal, they're this archetype, this sister being that we can follow, that can just reflect back to us so clearly.
It's so important for people to recognize that. I point this out to healers all the time that sometimes we kind of get wrapped up in, well, what am I doing to help? Or there's something I need to do to be healing the earth and helping. And there's so many forms that that can take, but to recognize that it just starts with our own consciousness and our own wellness and tending to that. And from there, there might be specific actions that we're inspired to take. But just to know that whether or not someone's physically working with the bees, they can still be affecting the wellness of the bees by tending to their own wellness on that spiritual level that then affects the wellness of your emotions and mental life as well. It's so
Yeah.
important. And just looking at that, when you pointed out that mental barrier where the bees live in that threshold space between the physical and the spiritual, or between that dense layer that we perceive with our physical and all those higher levels of vibration that we only see when we're looking psychically or with our soul awareness. When the bees live in that realm and it's dense and solid, they suffer. But when that space between opens up and there's clarity and a release of all that density,
Yeah.
we see that in the wellness of the bees, and that's something that each and every human can tend to, because that mental barrier is really just our own consciousness, and the collective consciousness is affected by each individual's consciousness. So just to know that, like, we can support the bees just with our own awareness and consciousness, and cleaning that space up and
Absolutely.
welcoming in our spiritual awareness.
This
That's
might be
huge.
this might be a good spot to
Keep
dial.
it simple.
Yeah, keep it simple, exactly. And earlier I said I feel like I have it kind of dialed in. There
Yeah.
are so I mean I'm sure there are many different ways that we can look at how to make that paradigm shift back into wholeness consciousness. And I've identified these three, well, I call them the three big lies
Yes.
that are just so deeply interwoven, often in our own conditioning and, of course, the collective consciousness. Really sneaky sometimes. But what I call the three big lies, the first one's really the main fundamental one, and I think that it really goes, it's the biggest lie.
Yeah.
And it is that we don't belong with the earth, and the earth would be better off without us.
Wow. Yeah.
That somehow the human being is this foreign thing. And
Or like a cancer. I've heard some people describe humanity
right.
like a cancer.
And I mean, we can look around and we can say, wow, there's plenty of proof out there in the world that that's true.
Right?
Don't belong with the earth. Or we can begin to see that what we consider proof is actually our past thinking. Like that became the self-fulfilling prophecy out of that paradigm.
Right.
And we have completely written ourselves out of nature. When you look at the dictionary definition of nature, I mean, in any dictionary, you'll find something along the lines of basically pretty much all the natural worlds except human beings.
Yeah. It's
Right?
like something separate. Yeah.
Everything outside of us that's natural is considered nature, but we're not part of nature.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it's
so that's huge, you know, and the second lie is that it's too late. And that's really deeply reinforced, you know, through our media and all the movies that are out there. You know, it's like we're just going to either all kill ourselves or populate Mars or, you know,
Yeah.
all that.
Just creates so much hopelessness and helplessness and disempowerment and apathy and resignation. It's like, no, we can
Right.
create in any moment.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And the third lie is that as an individual, we can't make a difference. It's kind of that like, oh wow, there's 8 billion people, and who am I? Who am I going to make a difference in the face of all of this? But obviously from that wholeness paradigm, the exact opposite is true, right? The frequency that you carry is you, and you are crucial in the
Matter so much.
transformation. Yeah. Yeah, and so I guess it's probably easy to see how that has become the self-fulfilling prophecy. And those are the thoughts that were talked about in that excerpt from that book I was speaking of.
Yeah, that's the damaging, dense mental layer that contributes to the decline of bees is that hopelessness and helplessness and
Yeah.
just apathy, resignation. Yeah.
But it would just imagine for a moment if the opposite is true.
Right.
And that's why I gave a little talk a while back, and I spoke about that whole state of the bees and you know how many bees are dying and so on. And then I said it's actually too late to save the bees. At this point, we are asked to heal with the bees.
Yes.
Again, we can't solve those problems with that same consciousness.
Right.
You know, when I was speaking about those studies of, you know, it's like native bees versus honeybees, and well, who's thinking about the land? Why aren't we, you know, creating more corridors? Why aren't we bringing back forage to the land? And yeah, so if you imagine, what if actually we, of course, are part of the earth and we've been with the earth since the beginning, and the earth needs us. And
Yes.
it's not too late. We're going through a transformation.
That's
You know,
right.
we're going through a metamorphosis, and you are needed. You as an individual matter so much. You
Yeah.
know? Yeah, that's
Yeah.
what we want to get to. I mean, that's the remembering, right?
That's the remembering. Yeah. And that it is so simple because just in remembering that, the whole energy shifts. Like that solid, dense wall of really just fear just immediately clears up, and it's just joy and and clarity and creativity, right? We get to remember that we do matter and that we have so much creative power and that anything is possible. And then we can just get to the sacred business of creating together in a beautiful way.
Absolutely.
Just
Yep.
like the bees.
Yep.
Oh, I love that. I'm excited about it. I'm so glad you pointed out the three lies or the myths that so many of us might be operating from without realizing it. It's like pointing it out is so important because then when we're subconsciously operating from that, we can wake up and go, "Oh yeah, that's not I don't have to walk around acting like I don't matter or that my energy field isn't important,
Yeah,
to the whole."
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
It's so important.
I know. Yeah.
When I think about bees, I often have that more spiritual relationship with them, right? I've only been around beehives for short periods of time when I've visited, someone who was a bee tender or visited a farm that had bees or a home that had bees. But I'm very much connected to them in that more spiritual way. And so I'd love to hear how your relationship with them in that spiritual way. I know you tend them on a physical level too, but how do you experience that either in your dream world or in thought? How do they come through and communicate with you? Or what specific things have they communicated to you that you've then like do they give you directions or information?
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that's exciting. Oh my.
Tell me a story of what did you follow through on a bee's instruction and have some amazing things happen?
Yes. Oh
Yeah.
my. Oh wow. Okay, this could go. And so maybe I'll just tell a couple of
Yeah.
stories because
Whatever stories
I have
come to mind.
probably thousands that I could tell, but there's a big one that was actually more early on in my beekeeping or bee tending journey. And yet I see it deeply connected with this path of healing, of how the bees can bring healing if we're really working with them in this way. And this particular incident happened oh gosh, it's definitely a few years ago. I was living on a farm where I had beehives. This was before I lived here,
Yeah.
and was tending to hives. And there was one in a constellation of hives. There's usually one that is the communicator, is more of a communicator, maybe
Yeah.
the spokesperson for the constellation.
Nice.
That's what
Nice.
I mean, you can definitely deeply tune into each hive, of course.
Yeah.
I have found that to be true. I had a hive named Orca. Her name was Orca, and
Mhm.
she was a thriving, beautiful hive. And one night, she came to me in a dream, and in the dream, a bear had come to the hive during the night and, opened up the hive, and the bees were flying out, which was very dreamlike because, of course, bees don't actually fly at night. But and I woke up and I thought to myself, I don't know how I knew, but I knew that she was actually telling me that a bear was coming.
Mm.
And I didn't quite know what to do because, due to the timing of it and availability, I wasn't able to get what I needed to protect her. See, on that farm, they had had bees. The person who owned the farm had had bees for a long time, over 10 years, and had never had a bear come because they had 4 guardian dogs.
Mhm.
And so I had my bees there, and I did not have electric fencing or anything like that. But I ordered some things, and they weren't really going to come in time, and I was going to have to leave for a trip in a couple days too. And so honestly, what I did is I was really just speaking to some of the nature spirits on that land,
Yeah.
and speaking to the hive, and just said, please help me because I don't know how else I'm going to protect you. And almost exactly 48 hours after that dream, the bear came.
Wow.
And I had the hive strapped together. And so the bear actually didn't fully open the hive. The dogs were on the other side of the land.
Mm.
Something scared the bear off. And so
Okay.
the hive was just like kind of slightly tilted. And
Yeah.
I to set her back up. But I just remember that moment, when you have those moments where you can just feel this changes something inside of me.
Mm.
This whole experience of her telling me that this bear was coming.
Yeah.
I had been thinking for years that part of the task of the bees is to help us heal our relationship to time.
Mm.
What we think time is or how time operates, right? What is true time? And I found myself then suddenly like something I couldn't put into words.
Yeah.
That there was a shift that happened in me, realizing that they relate to time and to whatever we consider the past or the future in a completely different way.
Yeah.
So
That
I've
makes
had,
so much sense. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
That makes sense related to, how you pointed out that they live in that threshold between the
Mhm,
physical
mhm.
and spiritual, and that for humanity there seems to be like a big wall between the two, but it's really very fluid for
Hmm.
them. So then it would also be for the bees very fluid in terms of time and timelessness, because in
Right.
spirit there is no time. And that's something we can't, you can't even put that into words, right? You try to talk about that and it's just like, bup, bup, bup. Doesn't really work. But but that's such a demonstration of that the bees knew that the bear was coming, because they're in that realm where it's all happening all at once. And so they could communicate that, and then yeah, you could experience that awareness of the crossover between time and timelessness. Beautiful.
Yeah, so I feel lucky, blessed, maybe fortunate that this path has taken me down that road, and I've gotten to have just experience after experience
Yeah.
that have just been incredible. But there are ways that you can, of course, connect with the bees. One exercise, even if you're not tending, is what I'm wanting to say, even
Yeah.
if you're not the
Mhm.
beekeeper who's, you know, doing the physical. There are certainly ways that you can also become a very hands-off beekeeper, by the way, but we may not have time to talk about that today. But let's say you're visiting a hive and you're able to, observe a bit or come close. One of the beautiful um, motions that we see in the beehive so much is that, like that lemniscate, that figure eight, that they often
Mhm.
will fly like that. And when they're swarming, they're or flying as a swarm, there's a figure eight that becomes very visible. And one way to communicate with the hive, this is my friend Alex taught me this, that I just love it. It's just letting this lemniscate from you, from your heart,
Mhm.
originating, just coming from your heart, and then somewhere before the beehive, there's that crossover point and moving through the beehive
Mhm.
and then back into your heart. So you're with your consciousness, begin to just connect your
Mhm.
heart into the center of the beehive. And then that little crossover point, is something arises there. That's what's happening
Mhm.
between, really, you can approach any being like this. It's just this
Yeah.
invitation from my heart to your heart, and where two or more are gathered.
Yeah.
We then have that chalice of something is born between us,
Yeah.
of the spirit. And so it's an amazing way to begin to communicate and just feel a connection. And I guess my advice would be, don't have any agenda.
Yeah.
Don't have, it's just going and saying, who are you?
Yeah.
Right? And I would say, even all those practical things we talked about earlier, those are born, the things that really are born out of that question.
Yeah.
First, it's who are you? And then what do you need?
Yeah.
What do you need? And realizing that, you know, part of that disconnection consciousness, going back to that for a moment, it creates this illusion that we're the only ones growing and evolving, and
Mhm.
everything around us is somehow static.
Right.
Right? Like, think about that. Even the way we do plant medicine is, and it's not that those, the old teachings aren't necessarily true anymore, but sometimes we forget that the plants are evolving just as quickly as we are.
Yeah.
And maybe the plants are bringing us a new thing because they're actually part of this web of life, and they're responding in real time to
Yeah.
anything that's needed on the planet. And so are all the animals and the minerals and so on,
Yeah.
right? And so the bees are they're so open to us.
Yeah.
And so they can become a great teacher in that, a great teacher in just this connecting and seeing, who are you and what do you need? and we then receive what we need, right? When we do this with any living being, we receive what we need, and the next step on our path, our task.
Beautiful.
And I could finish with one more very healing imagination, is realizing that the bees actually see us, they see through us, right? So bees are hexagonal beings, right? They truly embody the hexagon. Their eyes are made of thousands of little hexagonal cells.
Yeah.
Somehow create this incredible, this incredible honeycomb that they make out of their own bodies.
Yeah.
Turn into this incredible structure of honeycomb, right? And Rudolf Steiner, in those bee lectures, he said the ways the bees can see our emotions, like whether we're afraid or angry or something, is he said they read the hexagonalness of our blood. So what I believe he was referring to is our crystalline structure
Yeah.
in our water body that holds all of the information. And they can see that. And so one thing, it may feel very vulnerable at first, but if you can allow yourself to become transparent, like in your own imagination, whether you're physically standing in front of a beehive or maybe you're just imagining yourself in front of the great being that is the bee, the great bee, and just stand there in everything who you are, that you are, in your truth, in your whole being, and just allow yourself to become invisible, like transparent, see-through.
Yeah.
Like the moment we begin to realize that that's how the bees really see us, as if we were see-through, they see right into us. At first, it's a little scary. You're like, oh,
You can't hide anything.
what's all in there? Those little shadows and things. But it's like
Yeah.
that's what wants to come to the light, and suddenly we begin to see those things in different ways. Combined with that unconditional love from the bees, it's a beautiful path.
So beautiful. Yeah. I love both of these visuals with the infinity loop. What did you call it? You had a different
The
name.
lemniscate.
Lemniscate.
Yeah.
Lovely. With that, just that invitation to be receptive, to be curious, and to be in a place of discovery. What am I here to discover about myself and the other, whoever you're communicating with, whether it's the bees or a friend, anyone.
Yeah.
And also with the other visualization, there's a tool in the clairvoyant world called body of glass, but it's really that clear body, that seeing yourself, totally transparent. And then what shows up is anywhere that you're not being transparent, right? Anywhere that you're in fear or resistance, holding on, not opening, not being open. And so I love that the bees are already seeing us in that place, right? They're very clairvoyant.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And also just imagining, I love too the visual of imagining how the bees see it, that hexagonal, you called it hexagonal seeing, like seeing everything from that geometrical vibration, really. It's a very high vibration that the bees are vibrating at. Of course, we hear it in their humming, but just to see where they are in terms of where they're seeing and living and perceiving from. It's a very high vibration, and it gives us a lot of information when we just tune in and allow that and come from that place of curiosity and wonder and discovery and openness. I love that. It's beautiful, beautiful path. And thank you for sharing with us a little tidbit of wisdom. I know there's so much.
Yep. I think, I mean,
The magic and mystery in the bees is pretty profound.
yeah. But I mean, hey, I feel like we were able to cover quite the gamut in our conversation because we were able to point to this physical need and their spiritual nature and what they're really asking of us and how to connect with them. I mean, it's a good first step. It's a good first step.
Yeah, and I think one of the most important and profound takeaways is just that all of these physical level problems that we see mirrored by the bees in terms of colony collapse, but that's showing us all the different kind of crises we have going on the planet all of that can only be solved from that
That's
spiritual
right.
level of just a
That's right.
total shift in consciousness. And
Yeah.
I know
It's
that's what's
beautiful.
happening on the planet right now. So I'm,
Yeah. And yet they're totally here with us, like on the
yeah,
path with us,
yeah,
and able to reflect exactly what they need and help us along the way, you know?
yeah.
Yeah.
And reflect what we need as well. Yeah, and communicate where we're
So
going since they
that's
live
right.
in that timeless space
That's
as
right.
well.
That's right. So instead of, yeah, that's why I'm shifting that language. Instead of we're trying to save the bees for years, I was like, maybe they're saving us, you know?
Yeah.
Who's saving who here, you
Right,
know?
right, right. This is a very
Yeah.
reciprocal relationship. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's, yeah, that's why healing with the bees. That's what I'm
Yes.
calling it as. We're healing with the bees.
I love it. It's such an
Yeah.
important reframe.
Hmm.
Puts us on the same playing field, right?
Hmm.
That infinity loop that I'm not going to remember the name.
Okay. It's the same as the infinity loop. Yeah.
But it's such a great visual, right? That we're in that same space together. Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing your light and wisdom and
So fun.
beauty.
My cheeks are kind of hurting from
I
smiling. So oh my
know.
God, it's super good. It's really good to be on with you, Jean. So
I
nice to
know.
talk with
Get
you.
the permagrin going on.
Mhm. Yeah.
So good. Thank you so much. And thank you, everyone, for being with us here today on the Higher Vibe. We will see you next time.
Bye.
Bye bye. Hello. Thank you so much for being here. We appreciate you watching. I hope you enjoyed what you saw. If you did, go ahead and hit like and subscribe. Share this with friends. Really helps us out, and we really appreciate it. And we look forward to seeing you next time.